Dark Satellite Media.
How do these things usually turn out, like audio wise with Zoom? Because I've thought about doing like stuff like this, but
well, listen, welcome to Red River Podcast. I just hit record. So
we're on.
We're on right now. This is episode 69.
Okay.
This is Kevin Egan from Beyond 1.6 band, Last Crime. So welcome, man. And to get into the conversation that you just started, ask me about the Zoom.
yeah. I was asking you how the like audio wise, like how do they come out?
So I'm not a fan of the audio of it, but like at a time like this, it just seems like the easiest thing to do. You know, You know, I'm not a big, like, I'm not gonna keep the video. We're just gonna pull the audio out of this.
Right.
Usually, like, you know, it would be like what we did with George with If I Ruled the World when you were on that.
Right.
So It was kind of like that. But I mean, let's put it this way. Everyone's doing it, you know, like I was listening to the Stern show a couple of days ago and he had on Billy Corgan and the phone dropped and he's just like, oh, I can't hear you. Oh, I can't hear you. And I'm thinking like, okay, so this is like the biggest show on the planet.
Right.
And we're all kind of like, you know, we're all trying to figure out the technology, but hey, we're all doing it. So do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, at this point, everyone's stuck at home and it's the only way to make these things happen at this point. So it's cool. Yeah. I mean, cause I listen to certain podcasts. I listen to, like Joe Dante's podcast. I listen to a lot.
I fucking love Joe Dante. I didn't know he had a podcast.
Yeah, it's great. And you know, sometimes the interview you could tell that someone at least one of them is in a studio somewhere, you know, with some like really nice microphones and stuff. And a lot of times it's just you could tell they're on a Zoom call, but it doesn't matter. It's all about like the content and about the conversation and stuff, you know.
So for me, like I've been doing it on the phone because I think the audio is better on the phone. But you know, it's just the visual. Like I see you, we could see the vocal cues. It's a little different. But yeah, I mean, like it's well enough. And you know, once I dump it into my editor,
right,
I could just fix it as best I can. But wow, Joe Dante, man, he's what I love about Joe Dante is he's such a goddamn cinephile.
He loves movies, and that's why he's a perfect host for like a podcast. Like he knows everything. And like, so with, you know, there's this other guy that does it with him, and then, you know, they usually have a guest and use at least once or twice during the conversations, they always have to always have to go to Joe as like a reference, like, and then he'll be like, oh yeah, 1957, you know, Hammer did this movie, and he knows all the actors, he knows about all their lives, he knows about the entire production, and like, you know, like he rivals Scorsese as far as like how much he knows about like movies, you know.
I heard him on like the Mick Garris podcast. So Mick is great too. So
he's great too. Yeah.
Them two going back and forth is so much. It's like so much fun. I got to listen to that. Maybe I forgot he had a podcast, but so listen, man, just to get everyone up to speed. I mean, you put out a documentary about your band, your first band for the most part, when you were like a teenager, Holbrook, New York. So just kind of get us up to speed as to what you did.
Yeah. So I was in from 1987 to 1989, I was in Beyond. We started it in Holbrook, New York, which is in
Broadway Ave.
Right off Broadway. Tom lived right off Broadway Ave in Holbrook. I grew up near the expressway, sort of like on the Lake Ronkonkoma border.
Yeah.
But but there weren't a lot of people into hardcore back then out there. It was pretty like slim pickings. And then, so once I got into hardcore, I knew I had to become friends with Tom. He played in this band called Third Planet with a couple of guys who ended up in 1.6 band, Lance and Mike. And Lance actually played on the Beyond demo. He was in Beyond briefly. And so I met Tom. We knew we wanted to do a band together. We did this band. We were more part of. There wasn't really a Long Island scene yet back then. There was more. It was more of a. There was the scene was in the city, was downtown at CBGB's, and that's really where we wanted to, be a part of. So
how do you get from like Holbrook, which is so fucking bumblefuck east, because I'm from Selden, so I know.
Right.
Like how does that process go? And what were the local shows like at that time in '87? I was so young.
Out on Long Island, out like Eastern Long Island. Yeah. Initially there were not many shows. Beyond only played 2 shows out there, like 2 official hardcore shows out there. We played at this bar in Smithtown with It was Absolution and Beyond, and I can't remember the third band, but it was the only time we ever played with Absolution, I'm pretty sure. But it was this bar on Route 25. I don't remember who booked it. It was near the train station. There weren't even like a lot of people there, but it was us and Absolution. We sort of like playing for each other. And then Sundance was the one place that had hardcore shows. Right. So yeah, Sundance was a big metal club, but hardcore was becoming a thing. So they started having hardcore shows, and they were pretty successful, like right off the bat, because there were a lot of kids who weren't going into the city, or they were sort of craving for that, like that experience, but on Long Island. And Frank Cariola, who ran Sundance, he liked hardcore enough, and I guess he saw the potential of it, so there were shows out there at Sundance was primarily. And then, I mean, before like Nassau County is a different story. Nassau County had shows pretty early on, like the right track in shows.
What were some of the bands at that point, like some of your peers that you were coming up from, like out here?
There weren't too many. From our area. They're really
like members. Like, I mean, some of those early members probably went on to do other things, probably later on, like the '90s.
Early members of Beyond?
No, just like in general, like just musicians locally.
Oh, locally, the only people that I knew that were into hardcore out by where we lived was Steve Driscoll, who went on to be in Scapegrace and Half Man. Like Steve, Steve and this guy Dan Morgan, they used to give us rides, or sometimes we would find ourselves at CB's without a car, and instead of taking the train home, which was took a lot longer than it does these days, but they would give us a ride home. So Steve Driscoll, when I think of the people who's from the Suffolk County that I was my close proximity, who were going to hardcore shows, it was really only it was like Steve Driscoll and Dan Morgan primarily. Okay. Who would there was this guy Aldo who lived in Holbrook. I didn't put this in the documentary, and I really should have, but no one kind of knows what happened to Aldo. Unfortunately, he's sort of like fallen off the map, and no one knows what happened to this guy.
Where's Aldo?
But he was older. He was like 24 when we were like 17. So he was like an adult. He had like a full-grown mustache. He looked like someone's dad. Yeah. And he actually gave me my first ride to CBGB's. So the first show that I ever went to at CB's was Warzone, Uniform Choice, and I can't remember the opening bands. Pagan Babies, I think maybe was the opening band. But I had become friends with Tom. He's like, oh, I can get us this ride to CBGB's this Sunday, and I was dying to go to CBGB's and see what this, the hype was about. And so he's like, this guy, and Tom is still to this day, he's you know, he just pulls stuff like out of nowhere, and you're just like, how did he manage this? You know, he's just, you know, there are just certain people who are like that, and you know, and Tom's definitely one. So he's like, oh, he's this guy from around the block, Aldo. He's gonna drive us to CB's. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Turns out Aldo is like, you know, he looks like he's like 40, and he's, you know, and Aldo has this friend Tony who's in the car, and Tony is like a punk. Like Tony is dressed like a punk. And we were, you know, there were already some pretty strict dividing lines between hardcore and punk at the time. Like, sorry, that's my cat.
Yeah.
like back then, you know, like already Mohawks were already out, you know, considered outdated, and hardcore was more like visceral and, you know, even violent in like a lot of ways. So there was like that dividing line. So, but this guy Tony, he was sort of like part of the older, he was older, and he wanted to prove to us how punk he was. So, you know, halfway to CB's, we're driving down the expressway, and Tony's like, pull over, I have to go to the bathroom. But we're stuck in traffic. And so Aldo can't get over. So he's like, just stop the car. So he stops the car, and Tony just gets out and pees in the middle of the Long Island Expressway, like on the divider. Like, and I think he was just trying to impress us, to show us like how punk he was. Yeah. And like, you know, Tom and I were just like, this guy's a joker. You know, like, we just thought this guy was like such a clown.
Sometimes when you have to piss in traffic or even shit, it's pretty dire when you're stuck on like the BQE.
You're stuck in traffic. It's pretty, you know, like these days, you know, you have like water bottles and stuff in the car. You could at least, you know, as far as like, you know, if you have to pee real bad.
I've never done a water bottle. So you've done water bottles? I mean, I would imagine you do that on tour all the time, but like I could just never do the water bottle. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've just had, you know, I've had jobs where I've had to drive for a living, and there's plenty of times I've been stuck in traffic, and I'm like, shit, I gotta pee, and getting out and peeing on the side of the road or whatever isn't really an option. So like, you just have to, you know, be creative or whatever.
Yeah. Well, where's Aldo? Where's Aldo? That's what we got to find out.
Where's Aldo? Yeah, it's funny. Like we've actually talked about putting a book together called Where's Aldo, because and like I said, I should have really focused on Aldo in the documentary a little bit, because if you look at like a lot of the old Live Beyond pictures, Aldo can somehow be spotted in a lot of those pictures, but like not obviously, just sort of like in the background. Like you'll look at a picture like 100 times, and then one day you'll just look at it and be like, oh my God, there's Aldo. Like he's in the background. So he was in like a ton of those pictures. So yeah, there really were like, it was like Tom and me. And then Vic got into hardcore soon after. He was Vic DeCara, who would eventually become Beyond's bass player, and he went to high school with us too. He got into metal. He was into metal when he and I first met, and then he got into hardcore afterwards. But he actually played. He sang and played guitar. Like he taught himself to play guitar within a month. Like no joke. Like within a month, he knew how to play like all of Master of Puppets, and like he was already writing songs. He was like a musical genius in like a lot of ways. So he had a band with the drummer for 1.6 band called Socially Incorrect, and they sounded like Metallica and like Suicidal Tendencies and stuff like that. And Tom even sang on one of the songs. But when Tom and I were really into hardcore, then Vic sort of like got into it too, and he sort of trailed along.
What were some of the like so as far as like you guys getting really into hardcore, obviously for metal, like what were some of the bands that really just influenced to push you in that direction?
For me, it was Minor Threat, Youth of Today. When I first heard Youth of Today, so this was speaking of like Eastern Long Island. I mean, you know, Record Stop.
Oh yeah.
Back then, when Record Stop was on Portion Road, that was about a 15-minute bike ride for me. It was really close to my house, and so Record Stop was hugely important for my musical development. So Teddy, I don't know if you know Teddy. Teddy, he used to work at Record Stop. He was a punk. He had a mohawk. He was the only kid who worked at Record Stop. Record Stop was like these like guys who were like in their 40s and like ran this record shop, and they were just kind of like, you know, grumpy old men who knew a lot about music, but they were just always grumpy and really surly when you tried to talk to them. And except Teddy worked there, and Teddy put together this section in the back of the store for hardcore and punk records. And it was just they gave him a little spot, and it was probably no bigger than my desk right here, but you know, there was probably maybe 30 records, and it was all the punk and hardcore records that they were selling at Record Stop. And that really was sort of huge to my musical development, like in a hardcore context, because I was already a metalhead. I had already gone through like Metallica and Slayer and all those bands by the time I was like 15. And I was looking for something that was more intense than that. I was looking for like something more intense. And the stories I heard about hardcore at CBGB's, you know, I thought maybe that might be where I want to go to look for something that's even more intense than like Slayer.
Yeah.
And so I remember I used to go through those records, and I remember the 7 Seconds record, The Crew, really appealed to me because the singer's name was Kevin, just like mine. And I thought Kevin Seconds, I thought that was clever. The name of his band was 7 Seconds. And it said something about positivity on the back. And I was sort of also attracted to the idea of like people singing about positivity and stuff like that. So I bought that record, and somebody there, you know what? Now that I think about it, there were like a couple of skinheads at our high school. There was these brothers, Dominic and Shane. I forget their last name, but they were into hardcore, and they were going into the city and going to CB's. And so I was talking to one of them one day, and they told me, they're the ones who told me about Youth of Today. That was the first time I heard about Youth of Today. So when I saw the Youth of Today record at Record Stop, I was like, I got to get this. You know, I want to see what this is like. And, you know, hearing Ray Cappo's voice for the first time, just that growl, and that, to me, I guess now if you listen to it, it doesn't seem as extreme as like Slayer or any of those bands. But to me at the time, it seemed more extreme than Slayer.
Why do you think that is?
It was just so like, if you think about hardcore doesn't sound as radical now because we've had 30 years to ingest it, and it's been, you know, it's sort of been normalized in a lot of ways, you know, and you know, in the 90s, hardcore scene became like a social scene too. It wasn't just like a thing about music. It was like where you went to hang. I mean, it used to be social scene, but I mean social scene where like, if you could even go to a hardcore show in the 90s to like meet girls if you wanted to, where like in the 80s that was not the case. Like there were girls and women at those shows, but they were usually like unapproachable because they seemed really tough, and you didn't want they probably could have kicked your ass, or they were someone else's girlfriend and you did not want to go down that path either, because
as soon as he gets back from the pit, he'll fight you.
Yeah, exactly. So like, you know, but in the 90s it became like this sort of like social sort of thing. So it seemed, but in the 80s, hardcore, it seemed really, really radical. Like the fast beats and just the way they were singing. You know, I think of Youth of Today, and I think of the band Straight Ahead with the singer Tommy Carroll. I think those two bands, just with their like really fast beats and their really super aggressive vocals, like, and singing, you know, like that, just like it does. Again, it doesn't sound
but also like
great.
The production too. Like back then, like when I first heard like you know, Black Flag or something, like it was just so different. Like you hear it and you're just like, holy shit, you're like this. It wasn't as heavy as Slayer at the time or whatever, but there was something about it that just seemed uglier. and just more raw. But I think it had a lot to do with the production and the actual just like it was just ferocious on certain things. So I think it felt like a real thing, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Like the certain ferocity to it, and the fact that it wasn't produced, you know, it was a very slick way. Everything was very raw.
And it's youth culture. You know, it was like total youth culture, like when hip hop first came out. But like, yeah, it's just like man. So I remember growing up and just hating certain bands because I felt like that's what like my parents would listen to, you know? So it was just like, oh, it's like, I hate Led Zeppelin. I'd rather listen to Minor Threat. As you get older, you realize it's stupid, but like, that's what it was. It was just that appeal to me. It's like, this is my shit. This is your shit. You know, and that was the appeal. It's like, okay, this is our stuff. This is what we like. This is, you know, and you could hear, you know, not so much youth of today, because I don't really know too much of them. I was more into like the more dissonant stuff, like I said, like Greg Ginn with Black Flag and stuff like that. But also like Minor Threat like blew my socks off. Like when I first heard Minor Threat, I'm like, how is every song awesome? Like how?
Yeah.
How is every song awesome? I don't understand.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. No, there is not one Minor Threat song that isn't great. Ian's voice was a huge influence for me when I first heard Ian MacKaye sing. Like that spoke to me in so many ways. And music, you know, I think Minor Threat was a big influence on Beyond because Minor Threat was pretty musical. Like they were out of all out of that first wave of hardcore bands from like 79 to like, you know, 83 or whatever, they like Minor Threat might have been like the most musical out of those bands, mostly because of Brian Baker's guitar. And Brian Baker was a huge influence on Tom when we first started writing songs. So you could
hear it as, like from like Do It On, where it's a lot of like unconventional stuff. Like there was like the hardcore stuff, but then there was also like a left field where you're just like, you know, and I told you before, like to me, Tom, you know, when I think of my favorite guitarist on the planet, and it really started with me with Quicksand. When I heard Slip, I'm like, who? Because Slip came out, I was like 13 or 14, and it just like blew my fucking mind because he wasn't overplaying, but what he was playing was so perfect. It just blew my mind, and then I went back and listened to all his other stuff. So was Tom always kind of like that much of a genius?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he had a couple of songs already when I became friends with him. He would, like I said, he played in this band Third Planet with the guys from 1.6 Band. So, and you know, Mike from 1.6 Band talks about it in my documentary, how, you know, Tom he already had some songs together and he was his own genius in like a lot of ways. I think Tom did learn a lot from Mike from that short time that he did that band with Mike, because Mike is a tremendous guitar player. Like Mike is just like, you know, I mean, out of all my friends, you know, I have a couple of friends who I call like musical, like geniuses, and Mike's definitely one of them. And so I think Tom learned a lot from Mike. But that being said, I think Tom was able to package things better. Like Mike has this amazing musical ability, and he's a really good songwriter. Some of his I mean, you know, he wrote all the riffs for 1.6 Band. I mean, that was a collaborative thing, but he wrote, you know, I mean, but Tom was really great at sort of compartmentalizing everything and putting everything in the context of a 90-second hardcore song, you know. And so he was really great at that. Yeah.
And that's like, you know, that's huge too. Like, you know, it's like songwriting is such a big thing. And when you're younger, like I guess like, you know, like a lot of the stuff, like I remember you just like write differently, man. You just like try different things. And as you get older, I feel like, you know, you go from like, you know, like stuff that you guys were doing in 1.6 Band, but then eventually like you'll hear something like Tom Petty's Free Fall and you're like, that's fucking genius, you know? But like back then, if I heard Free Fall and I'm like, I need to add 10 other parts to this, you know? So
yeah, I think it's a balance. I mean, you know, once 1.6 Band was over with, and I love the challenge of playing with those guys, and I love the challenge of, I mean, those guys were into mixed meters and odd time signatures and stuff like that. And that was a huge challenge to try and keep up with those guys doing that. And I really enjoyed, but after that band broke up, all I wanted to do was play an acoustic guitar because I wanted to sort of like simplify things again, and then I get sick of that. And I want to learn, and then I want to learn more about music to make things more interesting. So then I go back to that kind of stuff but it's like a back and forth.
So what was the catalyst to make this documentary? Because from what I gather from the movie is it seemed like you said it was just being asked to do that reunion set. Is that really where it all started?
That's where the documentary started. Yeah. We were asked to play out in California with the Rev Fest. It was their 30th anniversary. So this was 2017. So yeah, it was their 30th anniversary. And they asked us to play, and the promoter had offered to pay for our plane tickets. And I had just that day read about taking a train across the country and how cheap it was. So I was like, let me see if they'll pay for a train ticket instead of a plane ticket. So they did, because it was pretty much the same price. It was maybe $20 more for one way from New York to California. So I took the train from New York to California.
How long was that?
I'm sorry?
How long was that?
That was like 3.5 days. It was quicker than I thought it was going to be. I think it was 3.5 days. It wasn't like, it was pretty cool. It's cool when you go out west, like when you get out to like Utah and Colorado, you go through the Rocky Mountains. It's pretty wild. The rest of it's like cornfields, and it gets, driving is infinitely better than traveling on a train. But I never did it before, and when I was a kid, I loved that movie Silver Streak with Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. So I always wanted to do that, take a cross country. So I did that, and my friend Jason was like, you got to take my camera and film he gave me this Canon DSLR or DSLR camera. He's like, take my camera with me, film everything. He's like, even when you're out there, you should interview like the guys in the other bands and maybe do like a little thing about Beyond. Like maybe it was going to be like a 15-minute thing or whatever. Sure. It's like, oh, that's a good idea. So when I got out there, I was filming like behind the scenes stuff, like that hotel stuff that's in the film with Vic and Tom.
Yeah, you guys like practicing, right?
That filming them practicing and just acting like goofballs. And then I started interviewing. A lot of these people I had not seen in like a long time. So after catching up, I'd be like, listen, do you mind sitting down for 5 minutes and interviewing? And everybody was really cool about it. Like everybody was awesome about it. And then I came back and I looked at the footage and I was like, this is amazing. I was like, I don't think I can really do something unless I expand the interviews. So the first person I reached out to was Walter Schreifels from Gorilla Biscuit, Truth Today, Quicksand. And he and I sat down for almost an hour and did a more extensive interview. And Walter was really, Walter and John Purcell from Youth of Today, Judge, they were really sort of crucial in getting Beyond's name out there. Like they between the two of them, they really opened a lot of doors for us. They had us opening up for all their bands. Like it was, so they were like they were really important people to have in the documentary. So once I got Walter's like hour-long interview, I'm like, now I can really do something with some like meat and potatoes to it. And then I was able to reach out to Alan Cage, who used to play drums for us, who's also the drummer for Quicksand. So he and Walter are still, in touch. And then I did Alan's interview, and then it's just started snowballing. And then I had all these interviews.
Have you done something like this before? Because it seems like such an undertaking, or was it just trial by fire?
It was both. I did do a political documentary that was, ironically enough, it was about, not to bring about politics right now, but it was about like voter suppression and stuff like that. And except from people who really had legitimate claims to that. But
Yeah.
I did this documentary, and it wasn't that great. The limitations of it. The person who produced it was not particularly helpful in paying for things to really make it happen. Like, they didn't want us to talk to any of the people. They wouldn't pay for us to speak with any of the people who actually had their votes suppressed. Like, we wanted to go into like to go to Detroit and go to Milwaukee, like where votes were being tossed out and in black neighborhoods and stuff like that. We wanted to go there and talk to these people, and they wouldn't pay for it. So the documentary wasn't really anything that, but it was a huge learning experience.
Yeah,
it was a huge learning experience. And then sitting down and doing this, the plan was not for me to edit it. Like, initially, I had this roommate. I was sharing a loft space with someone in Brooklyn, and this guy was supposed to. He was a professional editor, and he was supposed to edit it. Unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, he was epileptic, so he was really nervous about, like, if he got caught the coronavirus. He wasn't sure how he. So he actually, funny enough, he took off for Florida, where his girlfriend lived. And I mean, the thing was, he left New York for Florida, and it turned out Florida was a lot worse place to be to ride out the pandemic.
Yeah.
But anyway, he wasn't really like someone you could really like count on. Like, there were times I would be like, hey, you want to like talk about the movie or work on the movie? And he would be like watching CNN, like on the flip side, like obsessing over Donald Trump, and like talking about, he would come in my room, tell me how much he hated Donald Trump. And I was like, that's great. I hate him too, but can we like work on this?
Can we work on
this documentary? And he was also like a pothead and stuff like that. And so it became clear to me that it was up to me to if I was going to make this movie, I have to.
Yeah. Could you do, I guess, like, I'm trying to like visualize it, because I think it's such a fascinating thing. I would love to make a documentary. I would love to do a lot of things, but it seems like it's, I don't know. We all love documentaries. I could watch a documentary on paint drying. You know what I'm saying? So it's such a like undertaking, and I'm trying to like picture, like, is it like, if you format it like a podcast, because it's, you're telling the story of this band that was so big in like the formation of like your life, like the early years. So it's I thought it was very well done. When I saw it said like written, directed, edited by Kevin, I was like, look at this motherfucker.
Yeah. Well, I think if you want to make a documentary, I think the probably the best approach to do it is to initially know what you want, the story is you want to tell, and then go from there. And I think a lot of it is just in the art of, you learn in the art of doing. Like, I didn't know anything about editing like a year ago, like from now. Like a year ago, I was doing a loose edit, so this way I could give it to James and he could fix it up. And then you're sort of forced. I was sort of forced to learn by just doing. So
like,
you just start
podcasting. Same thing with me. Like, I just, in the very beginning, I'm like, I think I know what I'm doing. And it wasn't until like maybe the 15th episode that I'm like, I think I know what I'm doing, and you just.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just, you just keep doing it and doing it. And then one day you like look at it and it's not so bad. And you show it to someone and then they make suggestions. And then those suggestions can either, you have to find the right people too, like who are going to be helpful, like people who know what they're talking about, because sometimes people will give you suggestions and it's not about even the work that you're showing them. It's about them telling you how brilliant they are and knowledgeable they are about everything. And that's not helpful. Like, you want people who are going to give you helpful critiques, but I was really lucky. Like Drew Stone, who did the New York Hardcore Chronicles.
Yeah.
He gave me really helpful critique. I showed him an early draft of the movie. My friend Nate out in Portland, I sent him, he gave me really helpful. So I found the right people to really give me, and then also my friend Dennis, who did the animation for the documentary. He was really helpful because he gave me a critique, but then he also offered his services as an animator, and he really raised the production value of the the documentary.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, and so somewhere along the way, like when did you feel like it was coming together? Like like immediately, because you talked to Walter for an hour, then you talked to Alan, and like at that point, are you just like saying, fuck it, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to do this? And what's it like to look back at that time, your life? Because it's such a, at our age, when you look back, it's like, it's fun, but sometimes it's almost like you're like, oh, wow, so much time has passed.
Well, it doesn't seem like that long ago, because at this point in my life, like the years are just flying by. Like I just moved to the country now. So at least, I'm going to try and slow things down a little bit, because life is just going, I really want to like enjoy my life. So I'm trying to like slow things down. So that was 3 years ago that I started, that started. And I don't know. I mean, once I got into it, I was pretty focused. I'm always pretty focused with all my projects. Like I'm always pretty focused, like whether it's music or film or whatever, I'm always pretty focused. So once I got that initial interview with Walter, then I knew that this could, I'll just keep building. I'll reach out to Alan, then I reached out to Sammy, and then, it just kept snowballing and snowballing. So it's just like, you don't question it too much. You just kind of like, let it go. But you also have to like keep feeding the monkey. You have to keep feeding it to keep it going. So you just do more work, and then then eventually you have a documentary. But I mean, it's not that easy. It was a lot of work, like this, especially this last, like since March, since the pandemic started. It was from March until December, except for I was sick for 3 weeks. Except for that, I was working like 10 to 12-hour days, like every day. Did
you get COVID? You said you were sick?
I don't know if it was COVID. My test came out negative, okay. But at the time, it was early on, so the tests were very unreliable back then.
Yeah.
I was sick. I lost like a little bit of weight from it. It wasn't fun. It was actually a really unpleasant time. But that being said, there weren't a lot of like respiratory issues connected to it, which it was, but that was also still possible that it could have been COVID. It took about a month after that for the sort of like the residual sort of effects to like disappear. So it very well could have been, but maybe not.
The band. So basically the band lasted 2 or 3 years, right? So it starts in like 87 and goes to like 89, you said?
To 89, yeah.
So what, just so for anyone listening, and even like me, like I don't really know too much of the history. Why do you think it just came and went so fast? Like, was it just meant to be that way?
We were just kids. That's the thing. It's like when you do a band, like with your friends and your kids, you don't know how to make those like really good decisions. Think like, oh, this is something really good that I should value and and maybe try and keep this band together. We were 17 when we started the band. We were 19 when the band broke up. I was going to college. Tom and Alan weren't getting along, which I think the funny thing is that Tom and Alan ended up playing quicksand with each other. So their lives were connected for the next 20 years after that.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why we broke up is because they were not getting along. Like they were always fighting about everything.
Was it music?
It was just, I think it was a personality thing, like I think probably to this day they're pretty much the same people. I mean, I don't know Alan as well as I did when I was 19 years old. It was only that hour that I spent with him for the interview, and then we caught up a little bit afterwards. But like Alan has always been a very serious person. Like he was the adult, and he was a year older than us, so he was the adult of the band, and he was always making the adult decisions. Tom is like a very he's very eccentric in his sort of in his tastes, in his behavior. He's a very unique person. Like he's a very unique person, which makes why he was able to do all this, because he thinks he has his own way of thinking, and he was able to write these very unique songs because you know, he like there, and that's what I think is really special about Beyond is that it really has that Tom Capone stamp on the music. Like it could be influenced by Minor Threat, could be influenced by Bad Brains, but it's, to me, it sounds like Tom Capone because I know him and I know what a unique person he is, and that is reflected in like the music. So you know, I think it was just a personality thing. They just clashed. How
did you feel towards the end? Like, I mean, like, so, you know, because you're so young, and at that point, like, you know, you don't think anything. At 19, you're probably like, I know, I was like, oh, I'll just live forever. So, like, what did you end up just, you know, did 1.6 start right after? I don't think so, right?
No. I went to college in Arizona for a semester, actually with Mike from 1.6 band. I remained on Long Island. Those guys had moved to the city. And so I still had the same friends from high school, and Mike was talking about going to college in Arizona. So I was like, all right, I'll try it. I was going to Hofstra at the time, and I didn't particularly enjoy Hofstra. It was very conservative, especially in the late 80s. Like the Reagan fan club was like a thing, you know. So
have you seen the Showtime Reagan 4-part docuseries?
No, but I want to see it. I heard it's great.
I watched the first 2. I got to finish up the last 2. It's I was like, I don't know, I was super young. Like I was like probably like 4 or 5 around that presidency. But like I remember, you remember in retrospect, and they did a really good job. The first 2 episodes are great.
Yeah, I heard it's great. I mean, the thing is like he's always, celebrated as this hero. But if you think of like all, like not to get too political, but if you think of all the issues that this country has suffered from since the 80s, it can all stem back to like the idea of trickle down economics and all these tax breaks and all the deregulation that he imposed, which, just caused like a lot of suffering for like a lot of people.
Yeah. Covered.
And not to mention his influence on the current administration. I mean, there was like, if you look at Trump's playbook, like a ton of it came out of Reagan's playbook, but just done to like the umpteenth degree, which is, So Hofstra was very conservative place. So I went to Arizona, and I was, that would only lasted 1 semester. And then when I came back, Mike didn't enjoy it either. And he was playing with Vinny and Lance. They had already started something, and it was a little more rock than 1.6 band turned out to be. But then when I jumped in and, everybody started listening to like a lot of the Discord bands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then the music changed, and it started to sound more like 1.6 band.
Those bands were super, man. I remember when I first started hearing Discord bands, like it was especially on Long Island, it was and it took me forever, man. I've mentioned this before, where I just couldn't understand a band that wasn't Minor Threat. I was like, Fugazi, I'm like, I don't want to listen to this. And somewhere around like maybe 2021, I kept hearing, my friend had a cassette, and anytime we were in his car, he would listen to Repeater. And one day it just fucking clicked. And I was like, this is the most brilliant shit I've ever heard. Well, I don't know what happened. Maybe I just turned 2021 and it just like clicked. Or maybe because he played it not like, when you like those old school cars, you only had one cassette, so you just listened to it.
Right.
Over again.
Yeah.
What did you think when you first heard Fugazi?
I liked it. The first time I heard Fugazi, I think it might have been like the demo. I think they had a demo.
Yeah.
That was going. It was going around. I think Beyond might have even still been a band, or just shortly after Beyond broke up. But it was around that time. I thought it was weird. It wasn't Minor Threat, and I was like, I figured I'd probably get used to it because I also loved Embrace. I loved the Embrace record, so I knew that Ian was capable of doing things other than
Yeah.
So I liked it, but I wasn't like totally amped on it the way I was Minor Threat. But then eventually, like Fugazi, like by like 91, like Fugazi was definitely like my favorite band.
Yeah. Something like that happened. So, and we talked about Brian Baker. Did you check out his new band, Fake Names?
I haven't. No, the only thing I saw Dag Nasty when they played at Brooklyn Bazaar, like maybe like 2 years ago now, or like a year and a half ago. that was the only thing that I've checked out that Brian Baker's done recently. I know he has Fake Names and he's got that Beach Rats, right? Isn't he in that band Beach Rats?
I haven't heard that, but like, so Fake Names is, the singer of Refused, one of the guys from Embrace and Brian, and it's great. It's like a
nice.
It's like and it's super catchy. Dennis has a great voice. One of like my favorite records of last year, because I guess we're in this year now. So where could people watch the documentary? I know it's is it Vimeo?
It's on Vimeo. Yeah, they can just go to my website, whatawaitsus.nyc. The name of the documentary is What Awaits Us, a Beyond Story. And so I have a website, whatawaitsus.nyc. And there are links to the Vimeo.
I'll put the links up too.
Awesome. Thank you.
And that's a Beyond song. So
yes.
Why did you choose that?
It was really, finding a title for this movie was really tough. I went through a different song titles, and then Tom had this famous saying. Tom was famous for calling everyone a sap back in the Beyond days. So I was thinking of calling the movie No Saps Allowed, or doing something, like a little more playful. And then if I really think about what the movie is about, because it's not just about the history of Beyond, there is the history aspect, but it's also about me as a 50-year-old man now, like trying to figure out how Beyond fits in my life, which it still does. Up until the pandemic, we were still playing, and we still plan to play. Like once this thing's over, we do plan on playing shows. So it was sort of like this existential sort of journey on trying to figure out, finding my place in that, making that connection again with Kevin Beyond of 17, with Kevin of, at 50. So, it was What Awaits Us sort of refers to the future. And also there's this, this sort of like this underlying sort of fear of death thing that I have that is expressed in it was, Tom wrote that song about his grandparents when they were elderly, and he was thinking, what are they thinking? Like that. And he wrote that. And as a 17-year-old person, I saw it as singing it through the voice of somebody who was like in their 80s and like facing like whatever. But now as a 50-year-old man, when I sing that song, I sing it like from my point of view, like 100% from my point of view. So that's one of the songs that really resonates now as being like a 50-year-old hardcore singer. Like, I can still do it. I can still sing the songs. I still have the energy to jump on stage. I still have the energy to push people away when they're trying to stage dive and crowd the stage. Like I could still do all of that, but there is this sort of like impending doom that like, there's nothing we can do about really. So
I think we all have that, man. I think most of us do. It's a bummer. In certain movies, I remember being like super young and watching. Like I remember being maybe like 10 or like, and realizing that eventually we're all going to die. Because like until then, you don't have that thing. You don't think anything of it. And I remember specifically watching the movie Miracle Mile from 1988. And it's
Anthony Edwards and Muriel Hemingway.
Yeah.
I forget her last name.
I forget.
She's from St. Elmo's Fire. Yeah.
Yes. And so coincidentally, the next person that we're going to have on is the director of that movie.
Of Miracle Mile?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. That's a great movie. Yeah.
Yeah, he did that, Cherry 2000, and I think he wrote Strange Brew. Cool dude.
What's his name?
Steve DeJarnett. We're friends on Facebook, and I tell him all the time, I'm like, yo, this movie gave me that impending doom. It was between that and They Live. I don't know why. Those two movies made me...
Yeah.
Like they made me realize that we're like there's an expiration date, and probably because Miracle Mile is so fucking bleak.
It is, yes.
That it's just man. It's an ongoing thing, and I don't know. Yeah, it's something I never want to think about, but it's there.
Yeah. No, I mean it's true. I do think about it a lot. Miracle Mile. I actually saw it. I think I saw opening day. I saw it I was working at the United Artists movie 13 on Sunrise Highway in Patchogue.
Nice.
There was the Patchogue multiplex.
Yeah.
And I was working there, and I used to get into movies for free. So I used to go. I mean, that's how I really got into movies. I would see everything, and I remember seeing Miracle Mile and loving it. And I couldn't convince any of my friends to go see it.
It's so good. It's one of those movies that, like, whenever, we all have, like, you and I both love movies, and we all have that batch of movies that we try to, like, push, because I feel like that movie never really got the love or recognition. When I think of, like, like this, like, disaster, or these movies that are just so fucking bleak, I'm like, yo, you got to watch Miracle Mile. And funny enough, like, I've been nervous about asking Steve to be on. He hit me up because he had something to promote. And I'm like nervous. I'm like, this dude directed Miracle Mile. I'm like, I can't talk to him.
Man, just talking about, if he had something to do with Strange Brew, that's like a good hour or two of content. You could talk about that. I would love to hear about that.
He fucking, I forgot. He explained it to me. It was like a writing thing. Like, he wrote it, and he was going to direct it, but it was like some, like, legal thing. But I was like, yeah, cool, man. And he's so cool, really cool on Facebook. But yeah, so definitely Miracle.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear that. Yeah,
that's right. Listen, if you want to come hang out, we'll do a 4-way Zoom. We could talk about Strange Brew.
Oh yeah, totally.
But okay, so listen, I know I asked you to do a couple of things. So being that What Awaits Us is a music doc, I also wanted you to give me, like, 5 of your favorite music docs, that maybe inspired this, or just shit that you love. So give them to me.
Yeah. There's actually really, because music docs, as much as, like, regular movies, like, I love music docs. The funny thing is, like, I don't really watch a lot of documentaries straight up.
Okay.
Like, I know people love documentaries, and it's funny that I made a documentary, but I just love, like, I love movies that are written in fiction. I think, and I've actually talked to my therapist about it, and, like, I think the reason that is because I need that buffer zone between, like too much reality is, like, just too much for me. I don't watch reality TV, even though that's fake.
Sure.
And, like, documentaries, like, I don't know. I just need, I like watching, but music docs are the exception. I love music docs. And, like, there were so many that I made a list, and there was so many to choose from, and I couldn't, I boiled it down to 6, if that's okay.
Yeah, whatever.
Boiled it down to 6. All right. So my list is on my phone, which I can't see right now, but I think I can remember them all. All right. So it's so Stop Making Sense, the David Byrne, the Talking Heads documentary, directed by Jonathan Demme. It's a concert documentary, but it really, and this is another thing that I my documentary is very narrative driven. There's a story there,
sure.
and I try and keep the story going. There are a lot of documentaries that don't have narratives, like the Not Agnostic Front documentary that came out, like, a year or 2 ago.
That was really good.
It was fantastic, and there was no, like, it wasn't like based on a narrative. It was more of like a portrait, which a lot of, like, true documentaries are just like portraits, like The Nook of the North, which the first documentary was like a portrait of this Eskimo, and, like, that was a really amazing portrait of, like, Roger and Vinny and their relationship together and their personality. It was really fantastic. I would love to one day make, like, that kind of documentary.
Shout out to Ian McFarlane, man. He made the shit out of that. We had him on If I Ruled the World. It was so good.
Yeah, that was really great. But so the Talking Heads documentary, even though it's a concert film, it is, like, this really great portrait of that band. You do get the essence of, like, all the players' personalities, and of course, like, the music. And I used to work at a video store in Texas only up until 2013. I worked at this video store, I Love Video. They just closed this year because of the pandemic. Like, they were holding strong, and they were community supported, and it was a really amazing place to work. And one of my go-to picks for when it was my turn to pick something to watch while we worked was Stop Making Sense, because you didn't always have to look at it. You had this amazing music that was going on all the time. And so I would constantly watch that all the time. So after that, so then the other concert film, The Last Waltz, Scorsese's The Last Waltz, which, I mean, it's a kind of an obvious answer, but like, you know, there isn't anything Scorsese has done that I don't think is genius. You know,
I love The Irishman. Were you one of the people that
I've seen The Irishman 5 times already.
Fucking great.
I think I thought it was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
You know, the effects were a little weird.
Whatever.
But you know what? You watch Citizen Kane, and some of those effects look a little clunky now, but it's still one of the greatest fucking movies ever made.
It was only weird when like Robert De Niro kicked that guy in front of the store, and
that's the one part of The Irishman that everyone has a problem with.
I'm like, he barely lifted his leg up.
I know, but it was great, yeah. But and Last Waltz, it's you know, it's this amazing exploration of like American music, and even though, after reading Lee Von Helm, the drummer for the band, after reading his autobiography, he talks about how a lot of the music was re-recorded the day after, because it was, the quality of the recording wasn't up to snuff, but they still wanted to keep the footage look great. So but he wouldn't do it. He was like, that's the show, whatever. But all the other guys, they went into and they re-record. So, but whatever. I mean, it's still like, once you watch it, like the music is so infectious.
Yep.
And, you know, it really is this sort of like time capsule of all great 20th century performers like Muddy Waters, Neil Young, and all these like great musicians. So after that would also another Scorsese documentary, because I think he's an amazing documentarian too, is the No Direction Home, the Bob Dylan No Direction Home.
I didn't see that.
He did for PBS. It's amazing. It's like 3 hours long. You know, it's about as long as The Irishman. Like, it's pretty, and it's really amazing because if you see like Bob Dylan talking on like 60 Minutes with Ed Bradley, Bob Dylan has no respect for Ed Bradley, and you could just tell, like, some cheesy TV journalist and you know, the fucking one of the greatest songwriters of the 20th century, and you could just tell. So Dylan's like mumbling, and he's throwing these like non sequiturs, sort of just, you know, just weird sayings at him just to confuse the journalist.
Yeah. And
Scorsese is the only person that Dylan is really truly like articulate with, and the interviews that he does for that documentary, it's like you're taught, like you have this idea of Bob Dylan. I do have this idea of Bob Dylan as being this sort of like mumbling, sort of like jokester kind of guy who, you know, his voice is blown and blah, blah, blah. And he's not what he once was. And then you watch this movie and he's like fucking sharp as a tack. And he's clearly one of the most articulate people, but it's only because of the respect that he has for Scorsese that he is actually like giving that person, you know. So that really made an impression on me.
And it's amazing when you think of like just the catalog, like, you know, years. It's like when you look at like certain catalogs, and he has one of those where it's like, how did you write 100 great songs?
Not even 100 great songs. It's like 500 great songs.
Yeah.
You know, he's really, I mean, for me, for my acoustic stuff anyway, he's huge inspiration. You know, I mean, the lyrics and the songs.
You come up with $24,000, by the way.
That's one of my favorite names for any of the bands that I ever played in. It was really something that was on the side of a bus one day. It was like, you know, it was some class action lawsuit, like, you know, claim your $24,000 or whatever. I thought that would be a great name for a band. And at the time I was playing in a band called Good Looking Shoe with my friend Mikey and my friend, John Sass. You know John Sass.
Yeah, was it Mike Post?
Yeah, Mike Post. We were playing in this band Good Looking Shoe, but we didn't have a name yet.
I remember.
So I remember like the day we were going to play our first show. And I remember that day, and I saw that bus sign, and I tried to sell them on that name. And but we already sort of agreed to Good Looking Shoe. So we're like, all right, we'll go with that, that was a funny name too. But $24,000, that was always one of my favorites. So then when I moved to Texas, I was like, well, whatever band I do, I want to call it $24,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just curious.
But so the next movie would be the Amy Winehouse documentary. Amy, like I'm not really an Amy Winehouse fan. Like I think she's hugely talented. I like the production of her recordings that they did at the Daptone like studio, and like they had like the Dap Kings backing them up. Like I like that stuff for that. I think a lot of her it's too pop for me. I don't particularly like pop music from like the last like 20 years or so.
I think she did great because I feel like Mark Ronson, his production style is so like, I don't know, it's just great. It's beyond pop music. I don't know if you've ever really listened to the Back to Black album, but it's really well written. And that's one record I could listen to all the time, but it's really because of his production. His production is so fucking genius.
He's great, and the Bruno Mars stuff that he does, I think that's great. Like I think you said, like it transcends pop music. It's more than pop music. It's just really great musicianship on it.
And he was a hip hop DJ. That's what he came up as in New York City. So he like his ear is just unreal. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah. No, he's great, and I think some of her music I really like. I heard there's a ska record. She did like a ska record that's supposed to be really great. But I haven't heard it. But the movie was just devastating. It was devastating, and the fact that it was there was no. It was all interview. Like it was just interviews. The entire movie. It was just going from one person telling the story to another. So there was a narrative to that, and it was just. And to be honest with you, that might have, I never even considered that. That might have been a huge influence on my movie, because really what I had at the end of the day was a lot of interviews. Yeah. And now I have to piece this, and this person's going to tell this story, and it's going to move to this part. And that's exactly what that does. But there's no voiceover, there's no, it just starts with interviews, and the whole movie and the interviews carry the entire story of this really tragic life. And it was really, really powerful. And again, like I'm not really like that big of a fan of hers. Like after watching it, there's things that I appreciate. But the filmmaking I thought was really great. That's whoever put that movie together, it was really powerful. So after that,
I'll give you one. Just recently, that Bee Gees documentary
was fantastic.
Like
it's so great.
I had no idea. So, it comes in like at the end of December, I'm like making my list for favorite movies. So I left it out, but it's just like, to me, the Bee Gees were just the soundtrack. I didn't really associate them with anything. So as I'm watching this documentary, I'm realizing all the songs that I knew that they did. And just the storytelling was just amazing. Like just what a great
It was what was great about that movie was, it was long, and it was pretty in depth, and it was, a lot of people didn't know that the Bee Gees were like a main thing even before Saturday Night Fever. They were huge, and they had these amazing hits. But what I really loved about it was I walked away from that documentary singing Bee Gees songs for the next 3 weeks. That's all I did was just sing those songs after that. And when I was making my documentary, I just wanted to make sure that people walked away from this documentary knowing what Beyond sounds like. They knew what Beyond sounds like. They knew they at least could, they heard the names of our songs, and they could maybe like possibly identify it. And like, so that was, but that Bee Gees documentary, the same thing. Like, I shut it off, and I was singing their songs all night, and then it just kept going for like the next 2 weeks. I just kept singing these songs, like in my head, So that's just the sign of,
the sign of it. Yeah. And it's interesting that you said, when you make this documentary, like, people will watch this documentary, and even if they don't know Beyond, they will, so they'll go back. And, what I realize, what I like about documentaries and podcasts too, it's like you keep these things alive in conversation. So you hear someone talk about something, you're like, I haven't seen Midnight Run in forever. I want to go watch it. And you keep these things that we love alive, so whether it's Beyond or, the Bee Gees or Midnight Run, it's just like, the conversations we have, like, you'll be driving. I'm like, oh, when I get home, like somebody posted a picture in like the Facebook group of like To Live and Die in L.A., a movie I haven't thought about in forever. I'm like, I want to fucking watch To Live and Die.
That's
in
a
LA.
great movie. Willem Dafoe is the villain in that movie, right?
Yep.
Like, that's a great movie. Yeah.
Well, Michael Mann, I think it was.
No, William Friedkin.
Was it?
Who did The Exorcist? Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Shit, that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's a really great movie. Yeah.
I was thinking William Peterson. I was like, oh shit.
Wolfgang Peterson?
No, the actor. I was thinking.
I see. Yes.
I associated him with Michael Mann just because I'm thinking Manhunter.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
But
I was thinking of another documentary that I really loved. Was this came out? I'm trying to think. Probably in the early 2000s. It's called "Standing in the Shadows of Motown," and it was about the musicians who played on the Motown tracks.
Okay.
You know, not the singers, but about the musicians or whatever. Kind of like the Wrecking Crew documentary that was out.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this was great. And this was the same. You know, it was done. You know, it was really well done. You know, it had interviews. It also had like a lot of recreations, like a lot of scenes of like their misadventures. They had like these sort of like recreations of them, which I thought was it's a really interesting thing to do. I considered doing that for my movie, but the fact was, like, I mean, I don't know. You have to be a really skilled filmmaker to be able to pull something like that off and not have it look cheesy. And these guys, whoever did the Motown documentary, they pulled it off. But the best part of that movie again is that they bring all the musicians together, and then they have Bootsy Collins sing a few songs. He does Cool Jerk. I'm trying to think. He does Cool Jerk. I can't remember what other song. And then what's her name? I can't remember her name. She's not Joan Osborne. She's not my favorite singer of the last like 30 years. Although ironically, she actually was one of Tom Capone's old roommates. Tom Capone shared an apartment with her at one point.
That's
before either one of them were like established musicians. Yeah. But she actually sings. I'm trying to think. She sings like a Spinners song, and it's a really amazing performance. So again, like I walked away from that documentary just with a lot of music in my head. You know, I think that's what I love about music documentaries. You know,
anytime, especially Motown, like just the melody on all those songs. You know, because you're a singer, I'm a singer. Man, when I think of like just coming up with catchy hooks, like not many catchier than like those Motown songs. It's like unreal.
Yeah. No, they're real. They're, you know, it's like the Beatles and Motown. They really like, for some reason, those songs are everlasting because for some reason those melodies are just going to like be around for like 300 years, you know?
So I'll add another one. One of my favorite music documentaries ever is on the Brian Jonestown Massacre, the movie Dig. You ever see Dig?
Yeah, I saw Dig. Yes. Yeah.
Fucking insane was Dig. Like
that was great.
A band like Anton Newcomb. It's amazing for me to watch someone. It's weird because he was so self-sabotaging of his career and this band that were, I don't know, it was just such a fascinating documentary on basically what not to do and their rivalry with like the Dandy Warhols. And man, I watched it and it was just watching them like fight on stage. He was like kicking the guitar player, like just batshit stuff, you know?
Yeah. I mean, what happened to him? Is he still around?
Yeah, he's still around, but I think it's, you know, they had their moment and you know, I think
he probably looks back at that footage and is embarrassed by it. I mean, I would be if
absolutely
that was me, you know. I remember I remember seeing that movie at the Angelica when it came out. Which however long ago that was.
2003 maybe.
Yeah, it was like around that time, and I liked it. I'm not like a huge. I don't know if I own any albums of them or like the Dandy Warhols, but it was really, you know, like again, I could watch anything by you know, any like music documentary just I think because I can they're relatable. You know, like I relate to the people on stage. Like I've been in bands with people like that who like throw tantrums on stage, and you know, and so I, you know, that somehow like I kind of like relate to it. But I always loved the fact that Boardwalk Empire used that Brian Jonestown Massacre song for their opening.
Yeah.
With all the bottles in the ocean and Steve Buscemi like walking away on the beach.
You know what's funny? I never caught that. I love the show. I'm gonna have to revisit that because I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I'm almost positive it's them. I'm almost positive it's them. And Terrence Winter purposely said he didn't want any like period music. He wanted something more like postmodern, where like it was.
I like when they
kind of.
I like. I like when they do stuff like that. Like,
I love that. I love it.
So I was watching Lovecraft Country. Yes. On HBO, and they had that. So it was like this like period piece and Lovecraft and all this other stuff. But the songs every now and then were modern, and some people gave that criticism. I think my girlfriend didn't like it. I'm thinking like, I don't care. I'm like, I'll hear Cardi B playing or whatever the fuck they had. I don't know. There's something about like, it doesn't have to be entirely, you could have certain period pieces match up with that, but like other scenes, the direction, the cinematography, and like the modern music really worked on that show for sure.
Yeah, they did the same thing with Good Lord Bird. Did you see that? The Ethan Hawke show?
I was going to. I heard it's amazing.
It's amazing. It was one of my favorite things of 2020. It was really great. And they did the same. It was about John Brown and being an abolitionist and trying to he was a catalyst to starting the Civil War. But they would cut to like hip hop songs or like pop songs from the 60s, along with like period stuff. Yeah. And I listened to an interview and he was saying that, they really want to get a point across that these issues in 1860 are similar to the issues that are happening now, and that there really is no past, present, future. Everything's sort of happening at the same time. So, they wanted to draw, by mixing the music, they were kind of like, they were trying to draw the similarities between then and now. And I think it worked.
I love that. I feel like Ethan Hawke really hit a nice second part of his career. He's been doing a lot of
definitely. Yeah. The Blaze Foley movie, I really love too.
Speaking of that, did you ever watch Tales from the Tour Bus on Cinemax? The Mike Judge.
No.
Do you know what it is?
Tales from the Tour Bus. I don't know.
It's Mike Judge. So, and no one watched anything on Cinemax. Cinemax, like, if your show was on Cinemax, I feel like it always, like, unless you ended up with that package. So Mike Judge put together 2 seasons of, the first one was Outlaw Country. And the second one was, funk musicians. And he would tell a story of these musicians, and one of them was Blaze. Like, it was just like these outlaw country dudes that were completely out of their mind, and it was animated, and he would tell this story, and it was so goddamn good, man. It's just a shame that it was on Cinemax. Maybe it's on HBO Max, because I know they merged a lot of stuff. But Tales from the Tour Bus, if you ever get a chance, watch some of that stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm a huge Blaze Foley fan. I love, it's a shame that he only put out like a little bit of music. Friends and I were just talking about it. He only put out 1 record and which is hard to find because I don't even have it. He had live performances that have been released like over the last 20 years that I was able to, but he's a great songwriter and, someone who, I don't know how old he was when he died, but he died young before he could really be an established musician, which was a tragedy. I don't think I can't, to be honest, I can't remember the last 2 movies
fine.
Unless you want me to, I can scroll on my phone to try and find them.
No, I mean, it's fine. So, just wrapping up here, like our podcast is pure minutia. We're pop culture, we're music, we're movies. So I know in your documentary you mentioned a lot of No Saps Allowed, and then the other thing that you mentioned a lot of was Iron Maiden, which is a band that I fucking love. We did a special episode. Me, Ron Grimaldi, and a few of other people did a full Iron Maiden episode. So I thought it would be fun to ask you in closing here, since it was mentioned in What Awaits Us. Give me your 3 favorite Iron Maiden albums, and then I'll give you mine.
Yeah. This is something that for the last 30 years, it just been stewing, inside of me because there'll be one day I can give you 3 different
Me too.
answers, but today, Killers, I think is their best record. Killers is my number one. I think Killers is the best record. It's the most consistent record too. Every song in Killers is great. I love the production on those Paul Di'Anno records it's so raw, so raw. Di'Anno's voice is so raw. Clive Burr on drums. I do think Clive Burr was the better drummer because Nico brings a lot of flash to it, but Clive Burr hit harder than Nico. So Killers, I think, is number one. My number 2 record is.
I was going to say Wrathchild. So before you finish there, so the first cassette I ever bought was Killers. So I completely agree. It's like I had no idea that they had 2 different singers by the time I bought it. But man, when I heard Wrathchild and Murders in the Room, just that record is so fucking good, and it still holds up. So the songs are amazing. It's the most solid. It's the most solid of their records. It's along with I do like these last couple of years. I've really, really grown to appreciate Number of the Beast as being one of their best records. It's another record. Number of the Beast is a record where there's not one bad song on it. There's not one song that I skip over. It's solid through and through. Even though I prefer Killers and Di'Anno's voice is so raw, the older I get, the more I really just appreciate Bruce Dickinson as a singer. He is just unbelievable. The gymnastics that he does as a vocalist, and he's still, I went to see him last year. My friend Rob was getting married, and I took him. It was like the weekend before. I took him to see Iron Maiden as a going away present, and I couldn't believe Dickinson was still killing it. Just one of the most amazing live performances from a vocalist I ever saw. So that made me really sort of revisit Number of the Beast. And Number of the Beast, it's just solid. There's not one bad song. And the production, I think that's sort of where they peak production wise. I think Number of the Beast is really great. Just the songs, Clive Burr is still with them. And then number 3 would be Power Slave, even though for me it was a toss-up between Power Slave and the Iron Maiden, the record Iron Maiden. Power Slave just because it had the most impact on me because I was 14 when it came out, and I just remember the explosion of how huge it was. It really, for me, that's where Iron Maiden really peaked. It was just they were so popular, and it's a great record. I don't listen to a certain part of the record. I do this with Peace of Mind too. This is why these 2 records would never make my top 3 list. Is I skip over the Duelist, the song The Duelist. Power Slave is an okay song, and then Back in the Village I skip over that. So there's 2 songs on Power Slave that I skip. And there's 2 songs on Peace of Mind that I skipped, To Tame a Land and Quest for Fire. I never listened to those songs. Yeah.
So that's why those records would never be whatever. But the songs that are on Power Slave, 2 Minutes to Midnight, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, Flash of the Blade.
Yep. Rhyme of the Ancient.
Yeah. Those songs will forever be in me and made a huge impact on me when they came out. So,
and I mean, man, what an album cover that was, just the Egyptian thing. It was just so cool. All that, visually as a kid, that's what I first saw, I would see, when I went and bought, the cassette is because I saw Killers and I'm like, this has to be cool, And the 2 that I bought ended up being my 2 favorite, which had to be, maybe it's the association when you buy something, as a kid, it just, I don't know, like maybe it's the first thing that I listened to because it was Killers, and funny enough, Seventh Son.
Seventh Son, yeah. Yeah, I bought Seventh Son because my friend Rob, who I took to Iron Maiden, he loves that album, and you were talking about how great it was. So I bought it. I gave it a shot. Like I'm not sold on it. But ironically, the first song on the Beyond album, Save Ourselves, was influenced by a song. I can't remember the name of the song, but it was influenced by the name of the song on Seventh Son. That because Tom is really into that record.
Okay,
he really loves that record.
I love, the songwriting to me, like, man, when I hear, but it's very different. So they really got proggy on Somewhere in Time.
Somewhere in Time, yeah,
and then they got like more song oriented on Seventh Son because you hear like Infinite Dreams, and it's funny, we were just talking about like dying. So that those lyrics really made me like also like, and it's funny because I was 88 too, the same year as Miracle Mile, so maybe my mind was being hammered by mortality by that record. But listening to Infinite Dreams, the Prophecy is on there, Clairvoyant, I love those songs, but it was also the first one that I got. And then Killers, I fucking loved. And I had no idea that there were two different singers until I got it. So those would be my number two. I would probably go Peace of Mind.
Peace of Mind.
For the third record, because
it's a great record. It's a great record. It is. It's just those two, like side two, for some reason, like it just always bored me. But I mean, The Trooper, which is one of the greatest fucking Iron Maiden songs, and Revelations, Flight of Icarus, like all those. Yeah.
But man, I just a great band, and I love them. So I just wanted to ask you that. But yeah, Kevin, we'll check out the documentary. I'm glad you finally got to do this.
Yes.
We'll put the links up, and I don't know. I mean, you said you were going to do a podcast.
No, I'm just thinking of, I was thinking about it when the pandemic first struck. I was like, because then I was put out of work, and I was doing my movie, but I'm just always looking for projects just to like do. I'm just constantly like working on stuff. So I did have this idea, but then like I was like, oh, are people going to do it on Zoom? Are they doing podcasts on Zoom now? Like I wasn't sure, and then I just got so engrossed in my movie that I just that was never like a thing. But I mean, who knows? I'm not. I'm not opposed to it. I always want to do something that's more based on movie. Like I always get my fill with the music side of me. There's always music to play. I always have a guitar. I can always book shows before the pandemic, and I can always but I have this like love of movies that I just, I feel like I keep to myself a lot of the time, so I have thought about.
Anytime you want to come back and talk about, like every now and then we'll do like a deep dive on a movie. If it works out with your, if we pick a movie that you like, come back.
Awesome. That would be great. Thanks for having me, man. I really, really appreciate
one last question.
Yeah.
What is the best Honeymooners episode?
Well, my favorite episode is the Blabbermouth episode. When the mother-in-law,
you're recording. My Buttercup,
that whole thing with the record and Norton like crying, and I love, that's my favorite episode. But I mean, maybe the greatest episode has to be like the $99,000 episode, like when he's on the $99,000 answer,
or when he receives Fortune.
The Fortune, yes.
Or
Sonny Boy
or Harvey. Oh, you're gonna get your friend Harvey.
Yeah, Harvey's another great. Yeah, my dad always quotes Harvey. He's always like, Harvey.
Why do you think that show? I always come to I watch it and I always think to myself, like, why is this still funny? Like some shows don't age well.
No, that show's gonna be around for. It's really smartly written. So one of the writers is Leonard Marx. I think his name was Leonard Marx. He was Groucho Marx's son.
Okay.
and he had that talent written. So the writing is just stellar. I mean, I would say the writing is comparable to like the writing on Seinfeld. Like it's like in between The Honeymooners and Seinfeld, there were not too many sitcoms that were as perfectly constructed the way those shows were constructed. So the writing, and I think just the magic of Ralph and Alice, you know, like the chemistry.
Magic. Yeah. The four of them, you know, and, you know, as a kid, whenever I would see them in something else, like it was a treat for me. Like when I saw the toy, I'm like, that's fucking Ralph.
That's Ralph Cramden.
You know, like whenever I would see Ed Norton, I'd be like, oh man, Ed, like I didn't care. I just knew that they were in this movie, and I wanted to watch it because I grew up watching those two guys. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, Smokey and the Bandit. I remember when Smokey and the Bandit came out, and I remember like I'm like, oh my gosh, the guy from Honeymooners, Jackie Gleason's in it. But my mom's like, you're not going to go to see that movie. But then it came on cable, and then, you know, so like, I mean, you know, this just goes to show like Jackie Gleason, you know, how like well-rounded of an actor he was. You know, he could do, you know, the sweet, lovable bus driver, and then he could do like the racist, you know, foul-mouthed, you know, sheriff. You know, Southern sheriff, you know. It's great. Yeah, I just, you know, I know that we both love that movie, so I wanted to ask you. But yo, thank you for doing it. Thanks, man. I'm gonna probably put it out Monday. You know, I don't think I really need to edit anything out of this, so it'll probably just drop as is. Yeah, I don't. I'm sure if I listen back, I'm gonna hear myself say and you knows a lot, which I've been trying not to do. Yeah. But you know, that's hopefully the more of these things I do, the less I'll do that. But sure. All right. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Awesome. Later. All right. Be safe. Bye. All right. Take care. That's